Eleanor's fingers trembled as she reached for the library window. The cold glass bit into her skin. Her heart pounded so hard she thought it might break through her chest. Behind her, in the darkness of London, church bells rang midnight. She had to do this. Her brother would die if she didn't. The moneylenders had made that very clear. 3 days, that's all the time she had left. 3 days to find the map her brother had gambled away, or Thomas would be thrown into debtor's prison, or worse. She pushed the window open. It creaked softly. Eleanor froze. Her breath came in short, quick gasps. No one came. No guards shouted. No dogs barked. She pulled herself through the window and landed on the floor with barely a sound. Years of making herself invisible had taught her how to move without being noticed. Years of being told she was worthless, ugly, and too plain to ever matter had made her good at disappearing. The Royal Library stretched before her like a cathedral. Moonlight streamed through tall windows. Books lined the walls from floor to ceiling. The smell of old paper and leather filled her nose. Eleanor had never seen so many books in her life. For just a moment, she forgot why she was here. She forgot about Thomas and his debts. She forgot about their stepmother who had thrown her out last month. She forgot that tomorrow she would have no money for food. She just stared at all those beautiful books. But the moment passed. Her empty stomach reminded her that dreams and books didn't keep you alive. Money did. Maps did. Things you could sell to cruel men who didn't care if you starved. Eleanor pulled the crumpled paper from her pocket. The moneylender had drawn a rough sketch. The map she needed would be in a cabinet near the east wall, second shelf, rolled in a leather case. It showed trade routes to the Orient. It was worth a fortune. Her brother had stolen it from his employer and lost it in a card game. Now Eleanor had to steal it back. She moved through the shadows. Her worn boots made no sound on the thick carpet. Everything in this library cost more than she would earn in a lifetime. The furniture gleamed. The curtains hung heavy and rich. Even the air felt expensive. This was the king's private library. King Edmund rarely used it. People said. He was too busy being important, too busy with his duties and his court, too busy being powerful and alone. Eleanor found the cabinet. Her hands shook as she opened it. Inside, leather cases lay in neat rows. She pulled out the second one, too small. The third one, too large. The fourth one. She unrolled it carefully. A map of European capitals. Wrong one. She tried another, and another. Sweat dripped down her back. Despite the cold night air, where was it? It had to be here. She was pulling out the seventh case when she heard footsteps. Heavy, male, coming closer. Eleanor's blood turned to ice. She looked around wildly. No time to reach the window. No time to run. She grabbed the nearest case and dove behind a massive desk. She pressed herself against the wood and tried not to breathe. The footsteps grew louder. A door opened. Light from a candle flickered across the walls. "I cannot sleep again," a deep voice said. The voice sounded tired, sad. Another night of ghosts and memories. Eleanor squeezed her eyes shut. "Please don't let him find me. Please." She had heard what happened to thieves caught in the palace. They didn't go to trial. They just disappeared. Her stepmother would be happy. One less mouth to feed. One less reminder of her father's first wife. The footsteps moved closer to the desk. Eleanor could see boots now, expensive leather boots. Polished until they shined. The kind of boots that cost more than her entire wardrobe. The person wearing them sighed. It was a sound filled with such loneliness that Eleanor felt it in her chest. She knew that sound. She made it herself sometimes, late at night when no one could hear. Another year older tomorrow. The voice continued. 35 years of life, 20 of them as king, and still no one to share it with. The boots moved away. Eleanor heard the scrape of a chair. Father would be ashamed. He married for love. I married for duty. She died anyway. They all leave. Eleanor's chest tightened. This was the king. King Edmund himself. She was hiding from the king in his own library. She was going to die. Her brother was going to die. Everything was falling apart. Her eyes burned with tears. But she didn't let them fall. Crying was for people who had time. She didn't. The king was quiet for a long time. Eleanor heard the rustle of paper, the scratch of a pen. More silence. Her legs began to cramp from staying so still. Her back ached. But she didn't move. Couldn't move. Hours seemed to pass. Maybe they did. Eleanor lost track of time in her fear and discomfort. Finally, the king spoke again. Tomorrow I must choose another bride. The council insists. The kingdom needs an heir, as if I am nothing but a breeding horse. His laugh was bitter. They will parade ladies before me. Beautiful ladies with empty eyes. Ladies who want a crown, not a man. Ladies who will smile and curtsy and never know me at all. The chair scraped again. The footsteps moved toward the door. At least here, I can be honest. At least here, no one pretends. The door opened, closed. The footsteps faded away. Silence fell over the library like a blanket. Eleanor stayed frozen for another 10 minutes. Maybe 20. When she was sure he was truly gone, she slowly stood. Her legs screamed in protest. Her back felt like it might break, but she was alive. She hadn't been caught. She looked down at the leather case still clutched in her hands. In her panic, she had grabbed something. Might as well see what it was. She unrolled the case carefully. But it wasn't a map inside. It was a journal, a leather-bound journal, with pages covered in neat handwriting. Eleanor knew she should put it back. Knew she should leave, but her eyes fell on the first line, and she couldn't look away. Today I buried my wife. The council says I must not weep. Kings do not weep, but I am weeping inside where no one can see. The words were dated 5 years ago. Eleanor's throat went tight. She flipped through more pages. Each entry was the same. Pain, loneliness, duty, the weight of a crown that no one understood. The king wrote like someone who had no one else to talk to, like someone who was drowning in silence. She should go. The sun would rise soon. But Eleanor kept reading. She read about a boy who lost his mother at 8, a boy who became king at 15 when his father died of fever, a boy who was taught that feelings were weakness, a man who married a kind woman and loved her deeply, a man who held his wife's hand as she died giving birth to a baby who didn't survive, a man who was told to stop mourning and find a new wife, to do his duty, to think of the kingdom. Eleanor's tears fell onto the pages. She wiped them away quickly. These weren't her tears to cry. This wasn't her pain to feel. She was just a thief, just a desperate girl trying to save her worthless brother. But the words in this journal touched something deep inside her. They reminded her that even kings could hurt. Even powerful people could be alone. A sound made her look up. Dawn was breaking through the windows. Pink and gold light spilled across the floor. She had stayed too long. Eleanor rolled up the journal carefully. She should take a map, should complete her mission. But her hands moved on their own. They tucked the journal into her cloak. They left the maps behind. She didn't understand why, didn't question it. She just knew she couldn't leave this journal here. Couldn't leave these painful words hidden in darkness. Eleanor ran to the window, climbed through, dropped into the garden below. She ran through the palace grounds as the sun rose higher, ran past guards who were changing shifts, past servants starting their day. No one stopped her. No one even looked at her. That was the gift of being plain and forgettable. You could disappear even in plain sight. She made it back to her tiny room above a bakery. The baker's wife let her stay there in exchange for cleaning. Eleanor collapsed on her narrow bed. Her whole body shook. She had failed. She had no map. Thomas was still in danger. But she had a king's journal pressed against her chest. She had his secrets, his pain, his loneliness. What had she done? The next 3 days passed in a blur of fear. Eleanor avoided the moneylenders, avoided her brother. She stayed in her room and read the journal over and over. She learned about King Edmund's favorite horse as a child, his love of music, his fear that he was failing his people, his dream of building schools for poor children, his guilt over enjoying simple pleasures when others suffered, his desperate wish for someone to see him as Edmund, not as the king. On the 4th day, guards came to the bakery. Eleanor heard their boots on the stairs. She knew why they were here. Someone had discovered the missing journal. They had found her somehow. She stood calmly as they knocked. When she opened the door, she held the journal out to them. "I took this from the Royal Library," she said quietly. "I am ready to face my punishment." The guard captain looked surprised. He took the journal carefully. "The king wishes to see you." Eleanor nodded. She had expected prison, expected punishment, but she would face the king with dignity. That's all she had left, her dignity. They took her through London in a covered carriage. People stared as they passed. At the palace, guards led her through halls of marble and gold. Every painting on the walls cost more than her life. Every vase could feed her for a year. This was a different world, a world she didn't belong to. They brought her to a private study. The guard captain knocked. A voice called out, "Enter." The room was smaller than Eleanor expected. Books lined the walls here too. A fire crackled in the hearth, and sitting at a desk by the window was a man. He was tall even while sitting. His dark hair was touched with grey at the temples. His shoulders were broad beneath his simple white shirt. He wore no crown, no royal robes, just a man in shirt sleeves looking tired and alone. King Edmund looked up as she entered. His eyes were grey like storm clouds. They studied her face carefully. Eleanor forced herself not to look away. She had stolen from him. The least she could do was face him without cowering. "Leave us," the king said to the guards. They hesitated. "I said leave us." The door closed behind them.
Silence filled the room.
Eleanor's heart pounded, but she kept her chin up. Finally the king spoke. "You read it. It wasn't a question." "Yes, Your Majesty." "All of it?" "Yes." He stood, walked to the window. His back was to her. "Then you know things no one else knows. You know my weaknesses, my doubts, my pain." He turned to face her. "Why did you take it?" Eleanor swallowed hard. "I came to steal a map, to save my brother from debtor's prison. I took the journal by accident. Then I read it, and I couldn't put it back." "Why not?" "Because no one should be that alone," she whispered. "Not even a king." Something flickered in his eyes. Surprise, maybe, or pain. He walked closer to her, close enough that she could see the lines around his eyes, the weight he carried in the set of his shoulders. "What is your name?" "Eleanor Ashford, Your Majesty." "And your brother?" "His debts. He gambled away his employer's property. I was trying to steal it back. I failed." Eleanor's voice cracked. "He will go to prison now. Perhaps he deserves it. He has made many mistakes, but you love him anyway. He is all I have left. The king studied her for a long moment. My advisors say I should punish you. Theft from the royal library is a serious crime. They say I should make an example of you. Eleanor nodded. I understand, but I find I cannot do that. He returned to his desk and sat. You have read my secrets. You know my heart. That puts you in a unique position. I will tell no one, Your Majesty. I swear it. I believe you. He picked up a paper from his desk. Do you know what today is, Eleanor Ashford? No, Your Majesty. Today is the day I am supposed to announce my betrothal. The council has given me a list of suitable ladies, daughters of dukes, nieces of earls, all appropriate, all acceptable. He looked at her, all strangers who will never know me. Eleanor didn't know what to say. The king stood again. He walked around the desk until he stood directly in front of her. You have a choice to make, he said quietly. You can go to prison for your crime. Your brother will go to debtor's prison for his. You will both likely die there within a year. Eleanor's stomach dropped. Or you can marry me. The world tilted sideways. Eleanor grabbed the edge of the desk to steady herself. Your Majesty, I don't understand. You know my secrets. You have seen my pain. You said no one should be that alone. His grey eyes held hers. I am proposing a solution that benefits us both. You need protection, security. Your brother needs his debts cleared. I need a wife. More importantly, I need someone who has already seen the worst of me. But I am no one, Eleanor breathed. I am plain, poor, common. Your council would never accept me. My council does not wear the crown. I do. His voice was firm. I have done my duty for 20 years. I have sacrificed everything for this kingdom. This one choice is mine. Eleanor's mind spun. This couldn't be real. Kings didn't marry thieves. Didn't marry plain girls with nothing to offer. Why me? Because you read my journal, and your first thought was that I shouldn't be alone. Not that you could use my secrets. Not that you could gain power. You thought of my loneliness. He stepped back, gave her space. I am not asking you to love me. I am not even asking you to pretend. I am asking you to be honest, to be real in a world of pretend. Can you do that? Eleanor looked at this man. This king, who wrote about his pain in a journal no one was meant to read. This powerful person who was offering her a way to save Thomas, to save herself. It wasn't love. It wasn't even really a choice. But maybe it was something else. Maybe it was a chance. Yes, she whispered. I can do that. The king nodded once. Then it is settled. We will be married in 1 week. I will have rooms prepared for you. Your brother's debts will be cleared immediately. He walked to the door and opened it. Guards, see Miss Ashford to the guest chambers. Send for a seamstress and someone inform the council that I have made my choice. Eleanor was swept away in a rush of activity. Servants led her to rooms that were larger than any building she had ever lived in. A woman measured her for dresses. Another woman brought food. Real food. Roasted chicken and fresh bread and vegetables that actually had flavor. Eleanor ate until her stomach hurt. Then she sat on the enormous bed and tried not to panic. She was going to marry a king. A sad, lonely king who wanted honesty more than love. What had she gotten herself into? The week passed like a dream, or maybe a nightmare. Eleanor couldn't decide. Servants dressed her in gowns she was afraid to touch. They fixed her hair in ways she didn't recognize. They taught her how to curtsy properly, how to address nobles, how to walk like a lady instead of a girl trying not to be noticed. The palace was full of whispers. Who was this nobody? Why had the king chosen her? The council was furious. The noble families were insulted, but King Edmund didn't care. He met with Eleanor twice during that week, once to explain the wedding ceremony, once to ask if she had changed her mind. "You can still leave," he told her. "I will not force you into this." But Eleanor had nowhere to go, no life to return to, and something in his grey eyes made her want to stay, want to know this man who wrote poetry in his journal late at night, this king who dreamed of a world where people could be honest. "I haven't changed my mind," she said. The wedding was small, no grand celebration, no crowds, just the priest, the council members who were required to witness it, and a handful of servants. Eleanor wore a dress of pale blue silk. It felt like wearing a cloud. The king wore his formal robes and crown. He looked every inch the ruler, powerful, distant, untouchable. But when he took her hand, his fingers were warm. And when he spoke his vows, his voice was gentle. Eleanor repeated the words in a voice that shook. Then it was done. She was queen. A girl who had been stealing food a week ago was now the highest lady in the land. The council members left quickly. They were angry. Eleanor could feel it in the air. The king led her to his private chambers. Their chambers now. Eleanor's heart raced. She had heard what happened on wedding nights. The servants had whispered about it, about duty, about providing heirs, about things that made her face burn. But the king simply showed her to an adjoining room. "These are your chambers. You may rest. I will not disturb you tonight." Eleanor stared at him. "You don't want... I want you to feel safe." He moved to his own door. "That is more important than anything else. Good night, Eleanor." The door closed behind him. Eleanor stood alone in her beautiful room and didn't know whether to laugh or cry. What kind of king married a girl and then left her alone on their wedding night? The answer came to her slowly. The kind who was too tired of pretending to start his marriage with a lie. Days turned into weeks. Eleanor learned to be queen. She attended dinners where people smiled at her and whispered behind her back. She sat beside the king during council meetings and said nothing. She wore her crown and her fancy dresses and felt like a fraud. But in the evenings, something unexpected happened. The king would knock on her door. "Would you like to walk in the garden?" he would ask. Or, "Would you care to join me for tea?" At first, Eleanor was too nervous to speak, but slowly she found her voice. They talked about small things, the weather, the garden flowers, a book she had discovered in the library. The king listened to everything she said, really listened, like her words mattered. One evening, 3 weeks after their wedding, Eleanor found the courage to ask a question. They were sitting in the library, the same library where she had hidden behind his desk. "Why did you really marry me, Your Majesty?" "Edmund," he said quietly, "when we are alone, please call me Edmund." "Edmund," she repeated. The name felt strange on her tongue. Personal. He set down his teacup. "I told you, you had seen my secrets, but you could have bought my silence, or threatened me. You didn't have to marry me." Edmund was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "When I was 15 and my father died, I was surrounded by people, advisors, council members, servants, hundreds of people all telling me what to do, how to act, what to say. I have never been alone since that day." He looked at her. "But I have also never been less alone. Do you understand?" Eleanor nodded slowly. "You're lonely even when you're with people." "Yes." His voice was soft. "But when you were in this library hiding behind my desk, I spoke honestly for the first time in years. I didn't know anyone was listening. I was just being myself, and then I learned that you were there, that you heard everything, and your first thought was compassion." He leaned forward. "Do you know how rare that is? To have someone care about your pain instead of your power." "I'm not special," Eleanor said. "Any kind person would have felt the same." "You are wrong." Edmund's grey eyes held hers. "I have met many people who claim kindness. They all want something. You wanted nothing." "I wanted a map," she reminded him. "To save your brother, not yourself." He smiled slightly. "That is the difference." Eleanor felt heat rise in her cheeks. No one had ever looked at her like this, like she mattered, like she was worth noticing. "I don't know how to be a queen," she admitted. "I don't know how to help you. You helped me by being honest. That is all I ask." From that night on, things changed. Edmund knocked on her door more often. They had dinner together every evening. He told her about his day, the problems he faced, the decisions he had to make. Eleanor listened. Sometimes she asked questions. Sometimes she offered thoughts. She always expected him to dismiss her, to remind her that she was just a common girl who knew nothing. But he never did. Instead, he considered her words carefully. Sometimes he even changed his mind based on what she said. "You see things differently," he told her. "You understand how my decisions affect normal people. The council only thinks about politics and power. You think about people." Eleanor began to notice things about Edmund, the way his eyes crinkled when he almost smiled, the way he rubbed his temple when he was tired, the way he always made sure she had the comfortable chair by the fire. Small kindnesses that he probably didn't even realize he was doing. She also noticed that the servants liked him. They were loyal, not out of fear, but respect. He knew their names, asked about their families, thanked them for their service. This wasn't the cold king the nobles whispered about. This was a man who cared deeply, but had learned to hide it. One afternoon, Eleanor was walking in the garden when she heard shouting. She followed the sound to find Edmund arguing with a council member, an older man with a pinched face and angry eyes. "You shame this kingdom with your choice of bride," the man was saying. "She is nobody. Common trash dressed in silk. The people mock you." Eleanor froze. She should leave, should not listen to this, but her feet wouldn't move. Edmund's voice was cold. "Lord Pemberton, you forget yourself." "I forget nothing. You have let sentiment make you weak. Your father would be ashamed." "My father married for love, as I have done." Eleanor's breath caught. Love? They had married for convenience, for mutual benefit, not love. Lord Pemberton laughed cruelly. "Love? You barely know the girl. You chose her because she is too ignorant to challenge you, too grateful to disobey. It is pathetic." The sound of flesh hitting flesh echoed through the garden. Eleanor gasped. Edmund had struck Lord Pemberton across the face. The older man stumbled back. "You will never speak of my wife again," Edmund said quietly. His voice was shaking with rage. "Not to me. Not to anyone. If I hear that you have said one word against her, I will have you stripped of your lands and titles. Do you understand?" Lord Pemberton held his face. His eyes burned with hatred, but he nodded. "Yes, Your Majesty, get out of my sight." The man hurried away. Edmund stood alone in the garden, breathing hard. His hand was clenched into a fist. Eleanor stepped out from behind the hedge. He turned at the sound. "How much did you hear?" he asked. "Enough." Eleanor walked closer. "You shouldn't have done that. He's a powerful lord. He insulted you. He spoke the truth. I am nobody. Common trash dressed in silk." Edmund closed the distance between them in 2 strides. He took her shoulders gently. You are my wife. You are the queen. You are the bravest person I know. Brave? Eleanor almost laughed. I was a thief, a failure. You were desperate and alone. You did what you had to do to survive. Then you showed kindness to a stranger in pain. That is not the definition of trash. That is the definition of strength. Eleanor's eyes burned with tears. Why do you care? This was supposed to be a marriage of convenience. You said you weren't asking me to love you. Edmund's hands slid from her shoulders to her arms. His touch was warm even through her sleeves. I know what I said, but I have learned something these past weeks. What? That pretending not to care is exhausting. I am tired of pretending. His grey eyes searched her face. I look forward to our evenings together, to hearing about your day, to listening to your thoughts. You make me laugh, you make me think, you make me feel less alone. Edmund, Eleanor whispered. Her heart was pounding so hard she could barely hear her own voice. I am not asking you to love me, he said again, but I need you to know that I am beginning to love you, and if that makes you uncomfortable, I will not speak of it again. But I will not let anyone insult you, not while I have breath in my body. Eleanor stared at him. This king, this powerful man who had everything, and he was choosing her. Not because she was beautiful, not because she was useful, but because she had shown him kindness when he was in pain. Because she was honest, because she was herself. I don't know what to say, she admitted. Say you'll stay with me, not because you have nowhere else to go, but because you want to. Eleanor thought about the past weeks, the quiet conversations, the shared silences, the way he listened to her like her words mattered, the way he made her feel safe for the first time in her life. This wasn't the passionate love from storybooks, but maybe it was something better, something real. I want to stay, she said. Edmund smiled. It was the first real smile she had seen from him. It transformed his whole face, made him look younger, happier. He took her hand and pressed it to his lips. Thank you. From that day forward, Eleanor felt something shift inside her. She started noticing things she had tried to ignore. The way her heart sped up when Edmund entered a room. The way she found excuses to be near him. The way his laugh made her feel warm inside. She was falling in love with her husband. The realization terrified her. Love meant vulnerability. Love meant pain when it was taken away. Eleanor had lost everyone she ever loved. Her mother, her father, even Thomas, in a way. What if Edmund changed his mind? What if he decided she wasn't worth the trouble? What if the council forced him to put her aside? Eleanor tried to hide her growing feelings. She stayed polite and friendly but kept her distance. If Edmund noticed, he didn't say anything, but she caught him watching her sometimes. His eyes soft and questioning. 2 months after their wedding, Edmund asked her to accompany him on a trip to the countryside. I need to visit several estates, he explained. I would like you to come with me, unless you would prefer to stay here. Eleanor wanted to say no. Distance seemed safer, but she heard herself say, I would like to come. They traveled in a comfortable carriage. The countryside was beautiful. Green fields and rolling hills, small villages where people came out to wave as they passed. Edmund told her about the land, the people who farmed it, the challenges they faced. Eleanor listened and asked questions. She was starting to understand how the kingdom worked. Understanding made her care more. At night, they stayed in manor houses. Nobles opened their homes to the king and his new queen. Eleanor saw how Edmund worked. He listened to complaints, settled disputes, made decisions that affected real lives. He was good at it, fair and thoughtful, but she also saw how tired he became, how much weight he carried. On the third night, Eleanor couldn't sleep. She went to the window and looked out at the moonlit garden. A knock on her door made her turn. Edmund stood in the doorway. He was wearing a simple robe. His hair was messy. "I saw your light was still on," he said. "Are you well?" "I can't sleep. Too many new things in my head." He smiled. "May I come in?" Eleanor nodded. Edmund entered and stood beside her at the window. They looked out at the night together. After a moment, he said, "You've been avoiding me." Eleanor's heart skipped. "No, I haven't." "You have, for the past 2 weeks. Did I do something wrong?" "No." Eleanor's voice was barely a whisper. "You did everything right. That's the problem. I don't understand." Eleanor closed her eyes. She could lie, could protect herself. But Edmund had asked for honesty. That was the foundation of their marriage. She owed him the truth. "I'm scared," she said. "Of what?" "Of this. Of you. Of how I feel when you smile at me." She opened her eyes and looked at him. "You said you were beginning to love me." "Well, I think I'm beginning to love you too, and that terrifies me." Edmund was very still. "Why does it terrify you?" "Because everyone I love leaves or dies or stops caring, and you're the king. You could have anyone. Why would you keep choosing me?" "Eleanor." Edmund turned her to face him. His hands were gentle on her arms. "I understand fear. I have been afraid for most of my life. Afraid of failing. Afraid of being alone. Afraid of never mattering to anyone beyond my crown." His thumb brushed her cheek. "But with you, I feel less afraid. You make me want to be brave." "I'm not brave," Eleanor whispered. "You are the bravest person I know. You survived when the world was cruel. You showed kindness when you had nothing. You married a stranger to save your brother, and now you're standing here admitting you're afraid. That is courage." Eleanor felt tears slip down her cheeks. Edmund wiped them away with his thumbs. "I cannot promise you that I will never leave," he said softly. "Death comes for us all, eventually. But I can promise you this. For every day I have breath, I will choose you. Not because I have to, because I want to." "Why?" Eleanor's voice broke. "I'm still just plain Eleanor. Nothing special." "You're wrong." Edmund leaned closer. His forehead touched hers. "You are extraordinary. You are kind and smart and honest. You see the world with clear eyes. You care about people. You make me laugh. You make me think. You make me want to be better." His voice dropped to a whisper. "You make me feel like Edmund, not just the king. Do you have any idea how precious that is?" Eleanor's hands came up to rest on his chest. She could feel his heart beating fast under her palms. "I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to love someone powerful." "Then love me as if I'm not. Love me as Edmund. Just Edmund." Eleanor looked into his grey eyes. They were full of hope and fear and longing. This was real. This moment was real. This feeling was real. She had spent her whole life invisible, unnoticed. But Edmund saw her, really saw her, and he chose her anyway. "I do love you," she whispered. "Just Edmund." Edmund made a sound low in his throat. Then his lips were on hers. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, like he was afraid she might pull away. But Eleanor pressed closer. Her arms went around his neck. She kissed him back with everything she felt. All her fear, all her hope, all her growing love. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathing hard. Edmund rested his forehead against hers again. "I love you," he said. I love you so much, it scares me too. Eleanor laughed. It came out half sob. We're a mess, aren't we? The best kind of mess. He kissed her again, softer this time, sweeter. Stay with me tonight. Just to sleep. Just to hold you. I want to wake up and know this is real. Eleanor nodded. They lay down on the bed together. Edmund pulled her against his chest. His arms wrapped around her. Eleanor listened to his heartbeat and felt safe, truly safe. For the first time in her life, she felt like she belonged somewhere, with someone. Thank you for breaking into my library, Edmund whispered against her hair. Eleanor smiled in the darkness. Thank you for leaving your journal where a thief could find it. They fell asleep, tangled together, and for one perfect night, neither of them was alone. The next morning, they returned to the palace. Something had changed between them. Everyone could see it. The way Edmund held Eleanor's hand, the way he looked at her, the way she smiled at him. They were no longer king and convenient wife. They were husband and wife in truth. But happiness made enemies pay attention. The council watched with growing anger. Lord Pemberton spread whispers throughout the court. The king is besotted with a commoner. She has bewitched him. He makes decisions based on her pillow talk, not wisdom. Eleanor tried to ignore the whispers, but they hurt. People who had been politely cold became openly hostile. Ladies whispered and laughed when she passed. Men looked at her with disgust. Even some servants became distant. Eleanor felt the weight of their judgment every day. Edmund noticed. He became protective, fierce. He dismissed 2 lords from the council for speaking against Eleanor. He made it clear that insults to his wife were insults to the crown, but his protection only made things worse. Now people blamed Eleanor for dividing the court, for turning the king against his advisors. They're right, Eleanor told Edmund one night. They were in his study. She had been crying and her eyes were red. I'm causing problems for you. Maybe I should leave. Leave? Edmund looked at her like she had struck him. You want to leave?
I don't want to, but maybe it's best for the kingdom, for you.
Edmund crossed to her in 2 strides. He took her face in his hands. Listen to me carefully. You are not leaving. Ever. I don't care what the council thinks. I don't care what the nobles say. You are my wife, my queen, my choice. And I will not let small-minded people drive you away. But they hate me. They hate change. They hate that I chose love over politics. They hate that you make me happy because it means I'm not under their control. He kissed her forehead. Let them hate. We have each other. That's all that matters. Eleanor wanted to believe him, but doubt ate at her heart. That night she lay awake long after Edmund fell asleep. She watched him breathe, memorized his face. If she had to leave him to protect him, she would, even if it broke her heart. The crisis came 2 weeks later. Eleanor was walking in the garden when she heard voices. She recognized one of them, her brother Thomas. She hadn't seen him since before her wedding. What was he doing here? Eleanor followed the sound to a secluded corner. Thomas was talking with Lord Pemberton. Eleanor hid behind a statue and listened. You promised me money, Thomas was saying. Lots of money. But I need to know the plan. The plan is simple, Lord Pemberton said. You tell everyone that your sister seduced the king, that she planned it all, that she broke into the library on purpose to trap him. But that's not true. Does truth matter? We need to discredit her. Make the king see she is a schemer. Once his love turns to disgust, we can have the marriage annulled. Then we will marry him to Lady Catherine. A proper queen. Eleanor's blood ran cold. Thomas laughed. Eleanor trapped the king. That's ridiculous. She can barely trap a mouse. But she did trap him. Whether it was intentional or not, the king is obsessed with her. It's unnatural. We need to break the spell, and you'll pay me £500. Once the marriage is annulled, yes. Thomas was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Fine, I'll do it." Eleanor was always useless anyway. At least she can be useful this way. Eleanor pressed her hand to her mouth to keep from crying out. Her own brother. The brother she had risked everything to save. He was betraying her for money. It hurt worse than any insult from the nobles. This was family. This was blood. She wanted to run, to hide, to disappear like she always did when things got bad. But then she thought of Edmund. Edmund, who had defended her, loved her, chosen her. She couldn't let these men destroy what they had built together. She couldn't be weak anymore. Eleanor stepped out from behind the statue. Both men jumped. Thomas's face went pale. "Eleanor, I can explain." "No need." Eleanor's voice was cold. "I heard everything." She looked at Lord Pemberton. "You made a mistake involving my brother. He's not very good at keeping secrets." Lord Pemberton's face twisted with rage. "You think the king will believe you over me? I am a lord of the realm. You are nothing. I am the queen." Eleanor lifted her chin. "And I have learned something these past months. I have learned that power isn't about titles. It's about knowing when to fight." She turned to Thomas. "You're right that I was useless. I let you use me. Let everyone use me. But I'm not that girl anymore." "Eleanor, please," Thomas whined. "I need the money." "You always need money. You always need saving. But I'm done saving you." Eleanor's heart was breaking, but her voice stayed steady. "You made your choice. Now live with it." She walked away from them, walked straight to Edmund's study. He was working at his desk. He looked up when she entered and smiled. Then he saw her face. He was on his feet immediately. What happened? Eleanor told him everything, every word she had heard. Edmund's face went dark with anger. "I will have them arrested, both of them."
"No." Eleanor took his hands. "If you arrest them, they become martyrs. The council will say you're punishing people for speaking truth, that I have too much influence over you."
"I don't care what they say." "But I do. Edmund, we have to be smart about this." Eleanor's mind was racing. For the first time, she wasn't thinking about survival. She was thinking about strategy. "Lord Pemberton wants to turn the court against me. What if we turn the court against him instead?" Edmund studied her face. Then, slowly, he smiled. "Tell me what you're thinking." Eleanor explained her plan. It was risky. It required her to be brave in a way she had never been before. But Edmund believed in her. That gave her strength. The next day, Eleanor requested an audience with the full court. Edmund tried to talk her out of it. "Let me handle this," he said. "You don't have to face them." "Yes, I do. They need to hear from me directly. Not from you defending me. From me defending myself." The throne room was packed. Every noble in the palace had come to see what the common queen wanted to say. Eleanor wore her finest dress, her crown, but her greatest armor was the truth. She stood before them all and took a deep breath. "I know what you think of me," she began. Her voice carried through the silent room. "You think I'm common trash, a nobody who tricked the king, a girl who doesn't deserve to be here." She looked around at their faces. Some looked guilty, most looked cold. "And you're right about some of that. I am common. I was nobody, but I didn't trick anyone." Whispers started. Eleanor held up her hand. The room quieted. I broke into the royal library to steal. That part is true. I was desperate. My brother owed money. He couldn't pay. I thought if I could steal something valuable, I could save him. She looked directly at Lord Pemberton, but I was caught. And the king, in his mercy, offered me a choice: prison or marriage. More whispers. Louder now. Eleanor's heart pounded, but she kept going. I took the marriage. Not because I wanted a crown, because I wanted to live. Because I thought anything was better than death. Her voice softened. But then something unexpected happened. The king was kind to me. He talked to me like I mattered. He listened to me like my words had value. And slowly, I fell in love with him. She turned to look at Edmund. He was sitting on his throne, watching her with fierce pride in his eyes. Not the king, Edmund. The man who writes in his journal late at night. The man who cares about his people. The man who is lonely even in a room full of courtiers. That's who I love. Eleanor faced the court again. Yesterday I learned that some of you are plotting against me. You want to annul my marriage. You want to replace me with someone more suitable. She pulled a paper from her sleeve. This is a signed confession from my brother. He admits that Lord Pemberton offered him money to spread lies about me, to claim I planned to seduce the king from the beginning. The room exploded with noise. Lord Pemberton jumped to his feet. Lies. She fabricated that. Eleanor walked forward and handed the paper to the nearest council member. The handwriting can be verified. My brother is waiting outside to testify if needed. She turned back to the court. But here's the truth. Even if I had planned it all, what does that say about you? That a common girl with no education outsmarted the entire royal court? That she seduced your king with nothing but honesty and kindness? That struck home. Eleanor saw nobles looking uncomfortable. Maybe the problem isn't that I'm common. Maybe the problem is that none of you ever thought to treat the king like a human being. You saw him as a tool, a means to power. I saw him as a man. She walked back to stand in front of Edmund's throne. She didn't kneel. She stood tall and proud. I am not the queen you wanted, but I am the queen you have. And I will not apologize for loving my husband. I will not apologize for being chosen. If you cannot accept that, then perhaps you should ask yourself why a common girl understands loyalty better than you do. Silence fell over the room. Eleanor held her breath. Then, slowly, one person began to clap, then another, and another. Soon half the room was applauding. Not everyone. Lord Pemberton and his allies stood frozen with rage. But enough people, enough to matter. Edmund stood. He descended from his throne and took Eleanor's hand. My wife is right, he said. His voice rang with authority. She is not the queen you would have chosen. She is better. She is brave and honest and kind. She sees people, not positions. She cares about truth, not power. He looked at Lord Pemberton. And anyone who plots against her plots against the crown. Lord Pemberton, you are stripped of your position on the council. You have one day to leave the palace grounds. Lord Pemberton's face went purple with rage. But he couldn't argue. The evidence was clear. He stormed from the room. Several of his allies followed, but most of the court stayed, and many were looking at Eleanor with new respect. That night, Edmund held Eleanor in his arms. They were in their bed, safe, together. You were magnificent today, he whispered against her hair. I was terrified. That's what made you magnificent. You were scared and you did it anyway. He kissed her temple. I am so proud of you. Eleanor turned in his arms to face him. I couldn't let them destroy us. What we have is too precious. What we have, Edmund said softly, is rare. Real love in a world of arrangements, honesty in a palace of lies, partnership in a place of power. He cupped her face. "You have changed me, Eleanor. You have made me better, happier, more human. You changed me too. You made me brave. You made me believe I matter." Edmund kissed her, deep and slow and full of promise. When he pulled back, his grey eyes were soft. "You matter more than anything, more than the crown, more than the kingdom. If I had to choose between being king and being your husband, I would choose you every time." Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. Happy tears. "I love you, Edmund." Just Edmund. "I love you, Eleanor, my brave, beautiful queen." They made love that night, tender and sweet and full of emotion, and when Eleanor fell asleep in Edmund's arms, she knew she was finally home, not in the palace, not in the crown, but in his heart. The months that followed were good. Lord Pemberton's departure weakened the opposition. More nobles began accepting Eleanor. She won them over slowly, not with politics but with genuine interest in their lives. She visited estates with Edmund, talked to farmers and merchants, started programs to help the poor. She used her understanding of common life to make real changes. Thomas was banished from the kingdom. Eleanor tried to feel sad about it, but couldn't. He had made his choice, just like she had made hers. Some people never changed. Some people never learned. Eleanor had learned. She had changed, and she had found happiness in the process. 1 year after their wedding, Eleanor stood in the garden, looking at roses. Her hand rested on her stomach. She wasn't showing yet, but she knew life grew inside her. Edmund's child, their child, a new beginning. Edmund found her there. He always knew where to find her. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "About how much life can change in a year. Last year, I was breaking into a library to steal a map. Now I'm standing here as queen, as your wife." She turned in his arms. "As the mother of your child." Edmund went very still. "What?" Eleanor smiled. "I'm pregnant." The joy that lit his face was beautiful. He picked her up and spun her around. Eleanor laughed. When he set her down, there were tears in his eyes. "A baby, our baby. Are you happy?" Happy. Edmund kissed her. "I am everything, complete, whole, perfect." He kissed her again. "You have given me everything, Eleanor. Love, partnership, purpose, and now a family." "We gave each other everything," Eleanor corrected. "You saved me just as much as I saved you." Edmund pulled her close. They stood in the garden as the sun set. Two people who had been alone, who had been broken, who had found each other in the most unlikely way. A thief and a king. A nobody and the most powerful man in the kingdom. A woman who wanted to save her brother and a man who wanted to be known. They had started with secrets and honesty. They had built something real from desperate circumstances, and now they had forever. Eleanor thought back to that night in the library, when she had hidden behind the desk and heard a lonely king speak his pain. When she had taken his journal instead of a map. It had seemed like a mistake at the time, a failure, but it had been the beginning of everything. Sometimes the things we think are failures are actually doorways to our future. Sometimes the worst moments lead to the best outcomes. Sometimes breaking into a library to steal a map means finding something far more valuable: truth, connection, love. And sometimes a hidden journal unlocks more than secrets. Sometimes it unlocks two hearts that were waiting to be found. Eleanor smiled and rested her head on Edmund's chest. She could hear his heartbeat, strong and steady, just like him, just like their love, just like their future. She had been nobody. Nothing. Invisible. But Edmund had seen her, really seen her, and in his eyes she had found herself, found her worth, found her voice, found her home. The girl who broke into the royal library to steal a map had unlocked something far more precious than gold or jewels or trade routes. She had unlocked the king's heart, and in doing so, she had unlocked her own, and they lived happily ever after. Not because their story was perfect, but because they chose each other. Every day, in every way, through every challenge. That was the real magic. Not a fairy tale ending, but a real love story that started with honesty and grew into forever.